She stalked my soulmate, sabotaged every moment of happiness, and made her distorted version of the truth public. So I made mine public too, with him by my side and irrefutable evidence in hand. But this story doesn't begin with revenge. It begins with a betrayal so subtle, it took me months to recognize it for what it was. A 20-year friendship silently rotting, like termite-infested wood, appearing solid on the outside while crumbling within. The smell of roasted coffee filled my small Portland office that September morning. I was finalizing the design of a wedding invitation, ironically my own, when my phone vibrated with a notification that would crack my world in half. An Instagram alert. Fiona had tagged me in a post. Fiona Brennan, my best friend since I was 9, the girl who slept over every weekend, who knew every secret, every fear, every dream, the woman I had chosen as my maid of honor without a second thought. I opened the post. My fingers froze on the screen. It was a photo of Caleb, my Caleb, taken through a coffee shop window. He was alone, looking at his laptop, completely oblivious to being photographed. The caption read, "Sometimes the universe puts the right person in the wrong place. Or is it the wrong person in the right place? Heartbreak. Hashtag soulmates. Hashtag cruel destiny. Hashtag impossible love." My stomach churned. It wasn't the first time. Over the past 3 months, ever since Caleb proposed to me at the top of Multnomah Falls, Fiona had been posting strange things. Quotes about unrequited love, melancholy photos with captions about accepting that some people will never be yours. I had ignored it, attributing it to some breakup she hadn't told me about, some heartbreak she was silently processing. But that photo, that specific photo of Caleb, taken without his knowledge, with that caption? My coffee cup grew cold, untouched, as I scrolled through the comments. Dozens of people asking, "Who is he? Tell the story. You deserve to be happy." And Fiona responding vaguely, fueling speculation as if she were narrating a tragic romance where she was the misunderstood heroine. I called Caleb. He answered on the second ring, his voice carrying that warm texture that always made me feel safe. "Hey, love, everything okay?" "Are you at Stumptown Coffee right now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I was. I just left. Why?" "Fiona photographed you, posted it on Instagram, with a strange caption." Silence. Then, "Wait, what? I didn't even see her there." "She photographed you through the window, Caleb, without you knowing." I heard him exhale slowly. "Paige, this isn't normal. We need to talk about Fiona." We needed to, but part of me still resisted. Fiona was my history, my chosen sister, the girl who held me when my father died, who helped me pick up the pieces when my first boyfriend cheated on me, who was present for every major milestone in my life. How could someone like that turn into this? The symbol started there, that untouched coffee cup, cooling on my desk. In the following months, I would find forgotten coffee cups everywhere, always cold, always untouched. As if my ability to savor something simple had been stolen along with my peace. That night, Caleb came to my apartment. He carried that characteristic scent of wood and drafting ink, wearing his blue flannel shirt that I loved. But his face was tense, jaw tight, in the way it got when he was processing something difficult. "I need to show you something," he said, pulling out his phone. "I didn't want to worry you before, but after that post today, you need to know." He showed me messages, dozens of them. Fiona had started sending messages to Caleb 2 months ago, right after the engagement. They started innocently. "Congrats on the engagement. Take good care of my best friend." But they quickly escalated to something darker. "Do you really think you know her? Paige has secrets, things she's never told you. I've known her for 20 years. You've known her for how long? 2 years? You're just a phase. She always comes back to me. In the end, she always comes back." And then, the most recent, sent that morning. "I saw you at the coffee shop. You looked so alone, so available. Does she really make you happy? Or are you just settling? My hands trembled holding the phone. It wasn't just inappropriate, it was predatory, calculated. Fiona was trying to plant doubts, create fissures, infiltrate the relationship like a silent virus. Why didn't you tell me before? My voice came out weaker than I intended. Because I knew it would hurt you. And because, he paused, running a hand through his brown hair, because I thought she'd stop, that it was just a temporary moment of madness. I blocked her after the first weird messages, but she created new accounts, multiple accounts, always finding ways to reach me. Stalking. The word hung between us, unsaid, but impossible to ignore. She's my best friend, I whispered, but the words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Was, Caleb gently corrected. The Fiona you knew at 9 years old isn't who she is now. Or maybe she's always been like this, and we just weren't paying attention. I spent the night awake, scrolling through years of memories, trying to pinpoint the exact moment my best friend had transformed into my stalker. But the more I looked, the more I realized the signs had always been there. I had just chosen not to see them. The way she always accidentally sabotaged my previous relationships, showing up at dates, telling embarrassing stories, planting seeds of doubt. How she became strangely competitive whenever I achieved professional success. How she monopolized my time, getting offended when I made plans without including her. And now, Caleb, the man I loved. The first serious relationship where I had set healthy boundaries, where I didn't let Fiona dictate the terms of my romantic life. And she couldn't stand it. The next morning, I woke up to 53 notifications. Fiona had posted again, this time an old photo of us from college, embracing and smiling. The caption read, "Sisters forever, no matter who tries to separate us, no matter who is temporary. We are eternal. P." The comments were a mix of, "Oh, how sweet," and confused people asking about the previous soulmate post. Fiona was building a public narrative, painting herself as the loyal friend, while simultaneously implying that Caleb was a threat to our friendship. It was textbook manipulation, and it was working. My phone rang. My mother. "Paige, darling, I saw Fiona's posts. What's going on?" Ruth Sullivan had that voice that always calmed me, soft but firm, like warm tea with honey. She had been a literature teacher for 30 years and had a gift for reading between the lines, for seeing truths others missed. "Mom, I don't know anymore. She's acting strange, very strange." "Strange how?" I told her everything, the messages to Caleb, the unsolicited photos, the vaguely threatening posts disguised as sentimentality. My mother was silent for a long moment. Then, "Paige, do you remember when Fiona was 15, when her father left home?" "Of course, it was devastating for her." "Do you remember what happened after? How she became clingy with you? How she had that episode when you went to spend the summer with your grandmother?" I vaguely remembered. Fiona had called every day, sometimes multiple times, had shown up at my grandmother's house unannounced, driving 3 hours for a surprise, had had a meltdown when I mentioned making new friends at summer camp. "She's always had abandonment issues," my mother continued carefully, "and you've always been kind enough to accommodate that. But kindness without boundaries isn't love, dear. It's enabling. And now that you're setting boundaries for the first time, choosing to build a life with Caleb, she's reacting like she did when she was 15. Only now she has more sophisticated tools, social media, constant access, the ability to make private public." My mother's words planted something in me. Not anger yet, but clarity. Fiona wasn't just jealous. She was in survival mode, fighting against what she perceived as imminent abandonment from the only person who had never left her. But understanding didn't mean tolerating, and clarity didn't mean acceptance. I picked up my coffee cup, cold again, untouched, and poured it down the sink. The dark brown liquid swirled down the drain, taking with it the illusion that I could simply ignore this until it disappeared. Some truths demand confrontation. Some friendships, however old, need to end for you to start living. And I was about to learn that sometimes the biggest betrayal isn't when someone hurts you once, it's when they hurt you repeatedly, and you keep calling it love. 3 weeks after Caleb's photo post, I decided to do something I should have done months ago: confront Fiona directly. I arranged to meet for coffee, ironically, at the same Stumptown where she had photographed Caleb without permission. If she wanted drama, it would be on neutral territory, with witnesses. I arrived 15 minutes early, ordering a green tea I knew I wouldn't drink, another cup destined to grow cold, untouched. Fiona arrived exactly on time, wearing a floral dress I recognized. It was mine, one I had lost 6 months ago. She wore it as if it were hers, as if stealing my clothes was just another expression of our sisterhood. Paige, she hugged me too tightly for too long. Her perfume, the same one I wore because she had started copying even that, suffocated me. I missed you so much. It feels like we haven't really talked in ages. Because you've been busy photographing my fiancé without permission. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't regret it. Fiona blinked, her expression shifting from performative joy to something more calculated. That? Paige, you're overreacting. I just saw him there and thought it would be a cute photo. I didn't even know he was there until you photographed him through the window, Fiona, and posted it with a caption about soulmates and cruel destiny. Don't pretend that was innocent. She sat down, ordering an oat milk latte, the same one I always ordered, another thing she had copied. You're misinterpreting. I was talking about something else. About how sometimes we feel connections with people we can't have. Like my fiancé? No, she laughed, but the sound was forced. God, Paige, you're paranoid. Caleb is great, but he's not my type. I was talking about a guy from work. You're projecting. Gaslighting. Classic. Making me question my own perception, my own sanity. I pulled out my phone, showing her the screenshots Caleb had sent me. Her messages. Dozens of them. Irrefutable evidence. Then explain this. The color drained from Fiona's face. For a moment, I saw something raw in her eyes. Panic, perhaps, or anger at being exposed. But she quickly composed herself, tears magically appearing. I was drunk when I sent those. It was a mistake. I was passing through a difficult time and her voice broke. You don't understand, Paige. Ever since you got engaged, you've changed. You don't have time for me anymore. I feel abandoned. So you harass my fiancé? You stalk me on social media? You steal my clothes? I pointed to the dress. That's mine, Fiona. You took it from my apartment. You said I could borrow it 6 months ago, and you never returned it. Just like you didn't return my books, my leather jacket, those silver earrings my grandmother gave me. It was all coming out now. Years of small pilferings I had rationalized as sharing between friends. But it wasn't sharing. It was appropriation. Fiona was slowly stealing pieces of my identity, trying to become me. You're being dramatic. Fiona wiped her tears, her voice hardening. I'm your best friend. I know you better than anyone, better than Caleb. And if you can't see that I'm just trying to protect you, protect me from what? From making a mistake. She leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something that looked like madness or desperation, perhaps both. You barely know this guy, Paige. 2 years? That's nothing. I've been in your life for 20 years. 20. Who do you think will be here when he leaves you, when the marriage falls apart? Me. Always me. Because I'm the only constant. I'm the only one who truly loves you. The words hung between us like toxic smoke. And in that moment, I saw, truly saw. Fiona wasn't in love with Caleb. She was obsessed with me, with owning me, with ensuring that no one else could have the central place in my life that she occupied. Fiona, my voice came out softer, not from kindness, but from genuine sadness. This isn't love. This isn't friendship. This is, you need help, professional help. Her face twisted. No, you're not doing that. You're not going to pathologize me just because I'm telling you truths you don't want to hear. The truths or your fantasies about how things should be? She stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. People around looked over. You'll regret this, Paige. When he leaves you, when you realize you wasted our friendship for a man who is temporary, you'll beg me to come back. And I don't know if I'll be there. Then don't be. My voice was surprisingly firm. Because I will no longer beg for scraps of respect from someone who should love me enough to let me be happy. Fiona left, leaving her latte untouched on the table, another cold, abandoned drink. I sat there for another 20 minutes, processing. My phone vibrated. Zach Cooper, my lawyer from college. Saw your WhatsApp status? Some friendships need to end so you can start living. Everything okay? Zach was direct, practical, no drama, exactly what I needed. Can I call you? Always. I told him everything as I walked home, the cold October air biting my face. Zach listened in silence, and when I finished, he sighed. Paige, this is stalking. Legally, you have grounds for a restraining order. The unsolicited messages to Caleb, the photos without consent, the obsessive behavior. I don't want to sue my best friend, ex-best friend. And it's not about suing her. It's about protecting you and Caleb, because this will escalate. It always escalates. His words haunted me for days, and he was right. 2 weeks later, Fiona made her nuclear move. She posted on Facebook, not Instagram, where I could easily miss it, but Facebook, where my entire family, coworkers, and casual acquaintances were. A long, emotional post, carefully crafted to appear vulnerable, but devastating. It's with a broken heart that I share this. My best friend of 20 years, Paige Sullivan, has completely cut me out of her life because her fiancé, Caleb Morrison, felt threatened by our friendship. He has isolated her from everyone who loved her before him. He monitors her messages, controls who she spends time with, and now accuses me of harassment for simply trying to stay in touch with my best friend. If you know Paige, please check on her to make sure she's okay. Abusive relationships start with isolation. I am genuinely worried for her. Hashtag abuse awareness, friendship matters, save Paige. My phone exploded. Messages from worried aunts, coworkers asking if I was safe, acquaintances who barely spoke to me suddenly offering to help me get out of this situation. Fiona had flipped the script. She had turned herself into the worried heroine and painted Caleb as an abuser. And worse, she used real abuse awareness language, appropriating resources meant for actual victims for her manipulative narrative. Caleb saw the post before I could delete the notifications. His face was pale when he arrived at my apartment that night. Paige, my boss called me today. He saw the post, asked if there was anything I needed to share about my personal life. My professional reputation is being questioned because of lies. I was trembling, not from fear, but from anger. Pure, crystalline anger that burned cleaner than anything I had ever felt. She went too far. Yes, she did. Caleb held my hands. And now we need to decide. Do we stay silent and let her narrative become the truth, or do we fight? I looked at him, this man who loved me enough to be patient through months of drama, who never pressured me to choose between him and Fiona until it became impossible not to choose, who was willing to have his reputation destroyed rather than force me to cut a toxic friendship. We fight, I said, but not in her way, not with lies and manipulation. Then how? With the truth, documented, irrefutable. We go public, but with evidence, screenshots, messages, a timeline of everything she's done. Not for revenge, but to protect ourselves and to protect the next person she decides to obsess over. Zach came that night, bringing his girlfriend, Kira, who was an investigative journalist. We spent hours compiling everything, every unsolicited message, every photo taken without consent, every stolen item, every documented lie. This is chilling, Kira said, scrolling through the screenshots. She created 7 different fake accounts to bypass blocks. This is clinical obsession. And now it's hurting my career, Caleb added. 2 clients called me today, asking about the accusations based on complete lies. Then you have grounds for defamation, Zach said. But more importantly, you have a story that needs to be told, not just to clear your names, but because obsessive behavior like this rarely has only one victim. He was right. When we started digging deeper, we found patterns. A former college roommate of Fiona's who had abruptly moved out mid-semester. A former boyfriend who had changed cities without explanation. A cousin who no longer spoke to her. All stories of obsession. All stories of people who tried to set boundaries and were punished for it. And all stories that remained private because no one wanted to seem dramatic or vindictive by exposing the truth. So, we do this, I said finally, but we do it right, factual, without excessive emotion, just truth. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up writing, editing, ensuring every word was accurate, every accusation supported by evidence. Caleb slept on the couch, exhausted from the stress, while I transformed months of pain into a document that would change everything. By dawn, it was ready. My answer, my truth, our defense. And when I pressed publish, I knew there was no turning back. But I also knew that for the first time in months, I was taking control of the narrative of my own life. If you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share in the comments if you've experienced something similar. The post went live at 6:47 a.m. on a Thursday. I had chosen the time strategically, early enough to catch the East Coast waking up, but not so early that it seemed desperate. Kira have helped me structure it as a Twitter thread with chronologically organized screenshots, each of Fiona's accusations refuted with timestamped evidence. The title was simple, My Response, When Friendship Becomes Obsession, a documented story. I didn't mention Fiona's name directly. Zach had advised against it to avoid legal complications. But anyone who had seen her post would know exactly who I was talking about. I included everything. Screenshots of her messages to Caleb, photos she had posted of us with timestamps showing she was physically following me, records of borrowed items that were never returned, and testimonials from others who had experienced similar behavior. The hardest part was including old messages, our conversations from years ago, where I could see, in retrospect, patterns of manipulation I had normalized. Messages where she made me feel guilty for spending time with other friends, where she threatened to harm herself if I didn't cancel plans to be with her, where she slowly built a dynamic where I was responsible for her emotional well-being. I'm not posting this for revenge, I wrote in the conclusion. I'm posting because silence allows abusive behavior to continue, because keeping the peace often means allowing manipulative people to control the narrative, and because I refuse to let lies about the man I love, a man who never isolated me, who always encouraged me to maintain healthy friendships, who simply set boundaries when he was harassed, go unchallenged. Caleb was by my side when I pressed publish. His hand found mine, fingers intertwined. No turning back now, he murmured. No turning back, I agreed. And strangely, I felt peace, as if I was finally stopping carrying a burden that was never mine to carry. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 hours, the post had 15,000 shares. Within 4 hours, 50,000. People began sharing their own stories of obsessive friends, of toxic relationships disguised as loyalty, of years spent trying to please people who would never be satisfied. But there was also backlash. Mutual friends of Fiona's, people she had carefully cultivated, feeding them her version of events, accused me of public bullying, of ruining someone's life for attention, of being as bad as her, if not worse. You publicly exposed a vulnerable person, one comment read. No matter what she did, that's cruel. You could have handled this privately. I had already handled it privately, for months, and I had been punished for it with public lies. My mother called at 8:30 a.m., her voice carrying worry and pride in equal measure. Darling, I saw your post. Half the city is talking about it. How are you? Scared, I admitted. But also relieved, like I can finally breathe. That's because you stopped carrying the responsibility for her feelings. You returned the weight to where it always belonged, with her. My mother paused. But Paige, you need to prepare yourself. Fiona will retaliate. People like her always retaliate when they lose control. She retaliated before noon. Fiona posted a video on Instagram, tears streaming, voice breaking, the victim performance perfectly calibrated. I just saw what Paige posted about me. I can't believe it. 20 years of friendship, and she publicly exposes me, twists my words, makes me look like a monster? Yes, I sent messages to Caleb because I was worried about my best friend. Yes, I posted photos because I thought we were close enough for that. But now I see that she was just looking for an excuse to cut me off, to replace me. And she found it in Caleb, who clearly manipulated her into seeing me as a threat. She held up an object to the camera, a friendship bracelet we had made when we were 12, worn and faded. I wore this every day for 17 years, every single day, because our friendship meant everything to me. But clearly, it meant nothing to her. The comments on her video were a mix of support, "You deserve better," and skepticism. But what about the screenshots Paige showed? Fiona was responding selectively, thanking supporters and ignoring questioners. Then she did something that made me stop breathing. She posted my home address. Not directly, she was too smart for that, but she posted an old photo of us in front of my apartment building with the address sign visible, with the caption, "I remember when we used to be neighbors, when she really cared, before he moved her away from everyone who loved her." It was a lie. I had never lived near her, and Caleb hadn't moved me anywhere. But the address was there, public, for anyone to see. Zach called immediately. "This is doxing. This is illegal. I'm filing for an emergency restraining order right now." "She's escalating," Caleb said, his voice strained. "Paige, maybe you should stay with me for a few days, until this calms down." But I didn't want to run. I didn't want to give Fiona the power to drive me out of my own home. No, I'm staying, but we're installing cameras and we're documenting everything. That night, as Caleb installed security cameras, I received a message from an unknown number. "You have no idea what you've unleashed. She's planning something. Be careful." "Who is this?" I replied. "Someone she obsessed over before you. Someone who barely made it out. She has a pattern. First, love bombing. Then, isolation. Then, when you try to leave, she destroys. Systematically. I have evidence. I can help." My heart pounded. "Meet me. I need to know everything." We arranged to meet the next day at a public coffee shop. The person who showed up was a woman in her 30s, short dark hair, eyes that carried the weight of someone who had seen too much. "My name is Vanessa Chen," she said, sitting down. "I was Fiona's college roommate. For 2 years, she was my best friend, until she wasn't." Vanessa told a chillingly familiar story. Fiona had latched on to her freshman year, becoming inseparable. When Vanessa started dating, Fiona became strange, jealous, possessive, started sabotaging the relationship, accidentally telling Vanessa's boyfriend about ex-boyfriends, planting doubts, showing up on dates. When I tried to set boundaries, she had a meltdown, threatened to hurt herself, said I was the only thing keeping her alive. So I stayed for another year, until I couldn't anymore. What happened? I moved out in the middle of the night, literally packed my things while she was in class and disappeared, changed my number, blocked her on everything. I thought I was free. Vanessa paused, hands trembling around her teacup. But she found ways, created fake profiles, followed me, showed up at my work. Eventually, I had to get a restraining order. And even then, it took another 6 months before she stopped. Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw your post, and I recognized the pattern. And because she pulled out an envelope. Because I kept everything, every threatening message, every documented incident, every time she violated the restraining order. I thought maybe, one day, it would help someone. The envelope contained years of evidence, and it wasn't just Vanessa. There was contact information for 3 other people, all victims of Fiona's obsession, all too traumatized or scared to speak publicly. "She has a pattern," Vanessa repeated. "She chooses kind people, empathetic people, people who have difficulty setting boundaries. and she drains them until there's nothing left. Then, when they finally try to leave, she paints them as villains, as if they had used and discarded her. Sitting there, looking at years of documented pain, something shifted in me. This was no longer about just me and Fiona. It was about a pattern of predatory behavior that had destroyed multiple lives. And if I didn't do something, if all of us didn't do something, there would be more victims. Would you all be willing to speak publicly? Vanessa hesitated. That's terrifying. She's terrifying when she's exposed. I know, but together, we are stronger than her fear. And maybe, just maybe, we can stop her from doing this to someone else. It took 3 days to convince the others, but eventually they all agreed. And when we posted our second thread, this time with 4 voices, 4 stories, 4 sets of evidence, all pointing to the same pattern of abusive behavior, the narrative shifted completely. Fiona was not a loyal friend being unfairly attacked. She was a serial friendship predator, someone who had left a trail of traumatized victims in her wake. And for the first time, she had no way to spin it. But I should have remembered what my mother said. People like Fiona always retaliate when they lose control, and her retaliation would be nuclear. The bomb dropped 3 days after the second thread, when I was beginning to believe the worst had passed. Fiona posted a video, not on social media this time, but on a YouTube channel created specifically for it. 45 minutes of her sitting in a chair, professional lighting, clearly scripted and rehearsed. The title, My Truth, How I Was Abused by My Best Friend and Her Manipulative Boyfriend. My stomach churned before I even pressed play. Caleb was by my side, Zach on a video call, all of us watching in growing horror as Fiona unfolded her masterpiece of manipulation. She started with tears, always tears. I didn't want to do this. God, I really didn't. But after being publicly humiliated, after having my mental health questioned, after being painted as a monster by people I loved, I have no choice but to tell my side. Her version was meticulously constructed. She admitted sending messages to Caleb, but framed it as desperate attempts to save my best friend from an abusive relationship. She admitted taking photos, but said she was documenting worrying changes in Paige's behavior. She even admitted borrowing my things, but claimed I had insisted because I wanted her to feel included. Every truth I had exposed, she twisted into her narrative of a heroic victim trying to save a naive friend from a controlling boyfriend. But then she went further. What Paige didn't tell you, Fiona said, leaning into the camera, is that Caleb has a history of abusive relationships, of women he isolated, controlled, and eventually discarded when they no longer conformed. My blood ran cold. This was a lie, a complete lie. But Fiona had evidence, screenshots of conversations that appeared to be from Caleb's ex-girlfriends, describing controlling behavior, photos of him with other women that she claimed were previous victims, even a supposed police report for a restraining order against him. All faked, all fabricated, but looking terrifyingly real. Caleb was pale, hands trembling. This never happened. None of it. I know, I said, holding his hand, but my heart was racing because Fiona had done something brilliant and terrifying. She had created fake evidence so convincing that even people who knew me would start to doubt. The video continued. Fiona claimed that I had become different since meeting Caleb, more isolated, more anxious, that she had tried to intervene and was punished for it, that Caleb had orchestrated the entire campaign against her to remove the only person who could save me from him. And now, she concluded, tears streaming, she has recruited others, people I also tried to help over the years, to join this smear campaign, because that's what abusers do. They isolate, they control, and they destroy anyone who tries to interfere. The video ended with an appeal. If you know Paige, please check on her. Really check on her. And if you're in an abusive relationship, know that there's help. Don't let them make you believe that the people who love you are the problem. She had appropriated abuse survivor language. She had used resources meant for real victims. She had turned a story of her own predatory obsession into a narrative where she was the hero and we were the villains. And it was working. The comments on the video were an avalanche of support. People sharing their own stories of abusive relationships, seeing fabricated parallels with Fiona's narrative. People attacking Caleb, demanding he be investigated. People calling me a victim in denial who needed to wake up before it was too late. My phone started ringing. First my mother, then coworkers, then concerned clients, all wanting to know if I was safe, if I needed help to get out. She completely inverted it, Zach said, his voice tense on the video call. And these fake pieces of evidence, they're good, professionally done. We'll need forensic experts to prove they're fabricated. How long will that take? Caleb asked. Weeks, maybe months. Weeks of our reputation being destroyed. Weeks of Caleb being painted as an abuser. Weeks of me being seen as a victim too blind to see her own situation. I wanted to crumble. I wanted to cry, scream, give up. But then I remembered something my therapist, Dr. Park, had told me years ago when I was processing my father's death. Pain that is not transformed is transmitted, but pain that you choose to process, confront, and use to grow, that becomes wisdom. Fiona was transmitting her pain, spreading it like a virus, infecting every relationship she touched. But I could choose differently. We need a press conference, I said suddenly. Not online, in person. Me, Caleb, Vanessa, and the others, together, with forensic experts, with lawyers, with real evidence, not screenshots that can be questioned. That's risky, Zach warned. If it doesn't go perfectly, you give her more ammunition. And if we do nothing, her narrative becomes truth. I looked at Caleb. I won't let her destroy you. I won't let her turn real abuse victims into pawns in her game. I won't stay silent while she appropriates real pain for her fantasy. It took 5 days to organize. Kira, the journalist, used her connections to secure legitimate media coverage. Zach brought in forensic experts who had analyzed Fiona's evidence and could prove it was fabricated. Vanessa and the other victims agreed to appear, faces visible, real names, willing to risk Fiona's retaliation for the chance to finally be heard. And Caleb brought something I didn't expect. His actual ex-girlfriends, 3 women whom Fiona had claimed were his victims, all willing to testify that not only had they never been abused, but they had never even met Fiona, that the screenshots were completely fabricated, using their photos and names without permission. The press conference was scheduled for a Tuesday at 2 p.m. at a downtown Portland hotel. I didn't sleep the night before. I stayed up rehearsing my statement, making sure every word was accurate, every accusation supported by irrefutable evidence. Caleb found me in the kitchen at 4 a.m., sitting in the dark with another cold, untouched cup of coffee. "Hey," he said softly, sitting beside me, "you're not alone in this." "I know, but I'm scared." My voice broke. What if they don't believe us? What if her narrative is so convincing that the truth doesn't matter? Then we live with clean consciences, knowing we did the right thing. He held my face, forcing me to look at him. "Paige, you taught me something in these 2 years. You taught me that kindness isn't weakness, that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, that sometimes the most loving act is to say no. And now you're about to teach that to hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Because your story, our story, will resonate. It will help people trapped in toxic friendships see that they're not crazy, that they deserve better." His words broke something in me. I cried, finally, completely. All the months of stress, fear, and pain pouring out in sobs that shook my entire body. And Caleb held me, not trying to fix it, just being present. When I arrived at the hotel, there was more media than I expected. Cameras from 3 local news stations, reporters from 2 newspapers, and, surprisingly, some social media influencers who had been following the story and wanted real-time coverage. I sat behind a long table, Caleb on one side, Vanessa on the other. Zach was at the end, with the forensic experts behind us. Caleb's ex-girlfriends were in the front row, ready to testify if necessary. I took a deep breath and began. My name is Paige Sullivan, and I am here to tell the truth about obsession, manipulation, and how predatory people use the language of real victims to cover up their own abusive behavior. I spoke for 20 minutes, methodically, calmly, presenting evidence timestamp by timestamp, proving that every one of Fiona's allegations was either a distortion or a complete fabrication. The forensic experts explained how her screenshots were manipulated, showing inconsistencies in metadata and formatting. Vanessa shared her story, voice breaking but firm. The other victims did the same. And then Caleb's ex-girlfriends, women who had never met each other before that day, but all sharing indignation that their identities had been stolen for Fiona's false narrative, testified that not only were the allegations false, but that they were considering legal action against Fiona for defamation and identity theft. This is not about revenge, I concluded. It's about accountability. It's about ensuring that predatory behavior is not rewarded with sympathy. It's about protecting future victims, and it's about saying, clearly and publicly, obsession is not love, control is not care, and appropriating the pain of real abuse survivors to cover up your own abusive behavior is, perhaps, the cruelest form of manipulation. The silence that followed was dense. Then questions, many questions, but not hostile, curious, investigative. Real journalists doing their job, not just repeating social media narratives. When it was over, 3 hours later, I was exhausted, but also light, as if I had finally put down a weight I had carried for too long. Caleb hugged me in the parking lot, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months, hope. "Is it over?" I asked. "No," he said honestly. "She'll try something else. People like her always do. But the worst is over. And you were incredible in there." That night, the story exploded. Not just locally, but nationally. Major news outlets picked it up, framing it as a story about the dangers of believing social media narratives without verification, about how victim language can be appropriated by perpetrators, about patterns of obsessive behavior in friendships. And Fiona deleted all her social media accounts, disappeared from online completely. But the story doesn't end with her disappearance. Because healing isn't about what happens to your abuser. It's about what happens to you. 6 months after the press conference, I sat in Dr. Allison Park's office, looking out the window at the blooming cherry trees that marked the arrival of spring. It had been a long winter, not just meteorologically, but emotionally. The kind of winter where you question if the light will ever return. But it was returning, slowly, in increments so small that some days I barely noticed. "How are you feeling?" Dr. Park asked, her voice carrying that attentive quality that made me feel truly seen. "Better, worse, different." I paused, searching for words. Some days I wake up and forget for a second. Then I remember, and it's like everything crumbles again. But the seconds of forgetting are getting longer, and the crumbling doesn't last as long as it used to. "That's healing," she said gently. "It's not linear. It's not waking up one day and magically being okay. It's those moments of forgetting getting longer. It's the crumbling getting shorter. It's learning to carry the experience without letting it carry you." The restraining order against Fiona had been granted. She could not contact me, contact Caleb, or come within 500 feet of our homes or workplaces. Zach had warned me that restraining orders were just paper, that if someone truly wanted to violate it, paper wouldn't stop them. But so far, Fiona had complied. Or, perhaps, she had simply found a new target. The thought made me feel guilty and relieved in equal measure. Do you still feel responsible for her? Dr. Park asked, reading my thoughts as she always did. Sometimes. I know I shouldn't. I know she made choices, that her behavior wasn't my responsibility. But 20 years of conditioning doesn't disappear in 6 months. No, but it is disappearing. One day at a time, one choice at a time. She leaned forward. Paige, can I ask you something? Have you ever thought about why you chose to make this public? The real reason, not the one you stated at the press conference. I was silent for a long moment. Because I was tired of carrying shame for things I didn't do. Tired of protecting someone who never protected me. And because my voice broke. Because if I didn't say something, the next person wouldn't know they weren't crazy, that they weren't alone, that they had a right to set boundaries without being punished for it. And do you think you achieved that? I picked up my phone, showing her my email inbox. Hundreds of messages, thousands actually, from people around the world sharing their own stories of obsessive friendships, of toxic relationships disguised as loyalty, of years spent trying to please people who would never be satisfied. One woman wrote to me saying she was in a 15-year friendship where her best friend controlled her through suicide threats. She read my story and finally had the courage to set boundaries. Another woman shared that her brother was in an abusive relationship, but no one believed it because the girlfriend was so nice publicly. My story helped her articulate what she was seeing. Dr. Park smiled. Then yes, you achieved that. The wedding was postponed, not canceled, just postponed. Caleb and I needed time to heal, to rebuild the foundation Fiona had tried to destroy. And surprisingly, the postponement was liberating. It removed pressure, allowed us to focus on becoming healthy instead of event planning. You know what's funny? Caleb said one evening, as we cooked together in his apartment, something we had started doing weekly, an attempt to create new rituals that didn't contaminate memories. I thought getting to know your friends, integrating into your life, was about being included. But now I realize I was observing, seeing how people treated you. And Fiona? She always treated you like property, not a person. I saw it, but I didn't have the language to name it until everything exploded. You tried to warn me, subtly, because I was afraid that if I was too direct, you'd choose her, and I would have lost you. He paused, stirring the tomato sauce. But now I understand that it wasn't my job to save you. It was just to love you enough to stay while you saved yourself. His words made me cry, not from sadness, but from gratitude, for this man who never pressured me, never forced me to choose, just remained constant while I navigated the chaos. Vanessa became an unexpected friend. We met monthly, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for long walks where we processed our shared trauma. She was in therapy too, working through years of damage Fiona had caused. Do you ever wonder if she was always like that? Vanessa asked during one of our walks through Forest Park. Or if something broke her and she never got fixed? Both, perhaps. Trauma doesn't excuse abusive behavior, but it explains it. She lost her father, developed abandonment issues, and instead of seeking help, she created patterns where she controlled people to ensure they would never leave her. And when they tried to leave, she destroyed them, because if she couldn't have them, no one could. I paused, watching a bird building a nest in a nearby tree. But you know what I realized? She never had me. Not really. Because you can't own people. You can only love or control. And she always chose control. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Fiona. My first instinct was to tear it up unread. Zach had advised me against any contact, but curiosity won. The letter was long, handwritten, smudged in places where she always treated you like property, not a person. I saw it, but I didn't have the language to name it until everything exploded. You tried to warn me, subtly, because I was afraid that if I was too direct, you'd choose her, and I would have lost you. He paused, stirring the tomato sauce. But now I understand that it wasn't my job to save you. It was just to love you enough to stay while you saved yourself. His words made me cry, not from sadness, but from gratitude. For this man who never pressured me, never forced me to choose, just remained constant while I navigated the chaos. Vanessa became an unexpected friend. We met monthly, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for long walks where we processed our shared trauma. She was in therapy too, working through years of damage Fiona had caused. "Do you ever wonder if she was always like that?" Vanessa asked during one of our walks through Forest Park. "Or if something broke her and she never got fixed?" Both, perhaps. Trauma doesn't excuse abusive behavior, but it explains it. She lost her father, developed abandonment issues, and instead of seeking help, she created patterns where she controlled people to ensure they would never leave her. And when they tried to leave, she destroyed them, because if she couldn't have them, no one could. I paused, watching a bird building a nest in a nearby tree. But you know what I realized? She never had me, not really, because you can't own people. You can only love or control. And she always chose control. 3 months later, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Fiona. My first instinct was to tear it up unread. Zach had advised me against any contact, but curiosity won. The letter was long, handwritten, smudged in places where tears had blurred the ink. Page. I know I have no right to write. I know you'll probably tear this up unread, but I have to try. I'm in therapy, real therapy, not just a session here and there. 5 days a week, intensive, working through a lot. My therapist says I have something called borderline personality disorder, that my fear of abandonment wasn't just normal fear, it was pathological, that the way I clung to people, how I reacted when they tried to set boundaries, wasn't love, it was terror disguised as loyalty. This doesn't excuse anything, I know that. But for the first time, I'm understanding why I did what I did, why I couldn't let you have your own life without feeling like I was dying. I hurt you. I hurt Caleb. I hurt Vanessa and so many others. And I spent years blaming all of you for abandoning me, when in truth, I pushed you away with my own toxicity. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for us to be friends again. I know that will never happen. I'm just saying I'm sorry, deeply, completely, and that I'm working to make sure I never do this to anyone else again. I hope you're happy. I hope you marry Caleb and have the beautiful life you always deserved. And I hope that someday, when you think of me, it's not just with anger, but also with an understanding that I was a broken person who broke others because I didn't know how to fix myself. With love, the real kind, not the possessive kind. Fiona. I sat with the letter for hours. Part of me wanted to believe, wanted to think that Fiona was finally gaining insight, finally seeking real help. But another part, the part that had learned to trust actions, not words, remained cautious. I showed the letter to Dr. Park at our next session. "How do you feel about it?" she asked. Hopeful, skeptical, sad, relieved, all at once. I folded the letter carefully. Part of me wants to respond, wants to say I'm proud of her for seeking help, but another part knows that any response would open a door that needs to remain closed. Then don't respond, but you can acknowledge to yourself that it's possible to feel multiple true things simultaneously. Hope for her recovery and firm boundaries for your own well-being. These things can coexist. I didn't respond to the letter, but I kept it. Not as an invitation for reconnection, but as a reminder that people are complex, that even those who hurt us deeply are humans struggling with their own pains, and that understanding does not require reconciliation. The wedding happened a year after originally planned, small, intimate, only 50 people, close family, real, not performative friends, and some of the women who had shared their stories with me after the press conference. Vanessa was my maid of honor, not because we needed to replace Fiona, but because she had become a real friend, someone who understood boundaries, respected autonomy, and celebrated my happiness without feeling threatened by it. When Caleb and I exchanged vows in the small chapel overlooking the Columbia River, we didn't mention Fiona. We didn't mention trauma or feeling or everything we had been through. We just promised to love, respect, and support each other as we both continued to grow into healthier people. But at the reception, during my toast, I said something that needed to be said. This year taught me that family isn't about blood or shared history. It's about who chooses to stay when everything crumbles, who celebrates your victories without envy, who loves you enough to tell you difficult truths, and who respects your boundaries even when they don't agree with them. I looked around the room, at my mother, who had been my rock, at Zach, who had fought for me legally, at Vanessa and the others who had shared their stories despite the fear, at Caleb, who had remained constant through it all. You are my chosen family, and I am grateful every day that I had the courage to set boundaries that allowed me to find you. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. 2 years later, I received a message from an unknown number. My heart pounded. Old fear, conditioning that might never completely disappear. But it wasn't Fiona. It was a 23-year-old woman named Iris. She had read my story online and was living a similar situation with her college best friend. The friend was becoming increasingly possessive, sabotaging relationships, showing up unannounced, making veiled threats when Iris tried to set boundaries. "I don't know what to do," she wrote. "Everyone says I'm overreacting, that she's just intense. But your story made me realize I'm not crazy, that this isn't normal. Do you have any advice?" I spent hours writing a response, sharing resources, explaining about restraining orders, documentation, the importance of trusting your gut. And in the end, I said something Dr. Park had told me years ago. Kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's enabling, and you don't owe anyone your mental health, no matter how long you've known them. Setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-care. And anyone who punishes you for taking care of yourself isn't a friend, they're a controller. Iris replied days later. She had confronted her friend, set clear boundaries, and when the friend reacted with threats and manipulation, Iris had cut off contact completely. "It hurts," she wrote, "but it's a healing pain, not a wounding pain, if that makes sense." It did. Total sense. Now, 5 years after the press conference, I have a life I couldn't imagine in those dark days. Caleb and I have a small house in Selwood with a garden where I grow herbs and vegetables. I have a thriving graphic design business, working with clients who respect boundaries and value my expertise. And I have a small but solid circle of friends, people who understand that quality outweighs quantity. I still see Dr. Park monthly. Not because I'm broken, but because healing is an ongoing practice, not a final destination. Some months are easy. Others, I still have nightmares about Fiona showing up, about being publicly accused, about losing everything again. But the nightmares are less frequent now. And when I wake from them, Caleb is there, reminding me that I'm safe, that it's over, that I survived. Not just survived, I thrived. There's a cup of coffee on my desk now, hot, not cold, untouched, not because I'm paralyzed by trauma, but because I'm engrossed in a project I love. And when I finally drink it, I savor every sip. Small victories, but victories nonetheless. I received an email last week from Vanessa. She's engaged. Met someone who respects her boundaries, who understands her trauma without letting it define their relationship. She asked me to be her maid of honor. I cried when I read it, not from sadness, but from joy, because we had both come out the other side. Not unscathed, never unscathed, but stronger, wiser, more capable of recognizing real love when we found it. As for Fiona, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she's living in Seattle, works in a bookstore, keeps a low profile, apparently still in therapy. Part of me hopes it's true, hopes that she has found peace, has learned to love without possessing, has broken the cycle that destroyed so many lives. But I hope from afar, because my healing doesn't depend on hers, and my happiness doesn't require her repentance. Forgiveness, I realized, isn't about absolving someone. It's about freeing yourself from the burden of carrying anger. And I freed myself not through dramatic confrontation or tearful reconciliation, but through a daily choice to live well, love well, and trust that I deserve relationships that nourish me instead of draining me. This story shows us that sometimes the people who hurt us most are those who claim to love us most, that obsession disguised as loyalty is still obsession, and that having the courage to set boundaries, even when others call you cruel, even when you're punished for it, even when it seems easier to give in, is the deepest act of self-love. Family isn't about who you've known the longest. It's about who chooses to stay when you set healthy boundaries, about who celebrates your growth instead of feeling threatened by it, about who loves you enough to let you be yourself completely, without fear of abandonment. Healing isn't linear. There are bad days, days when old fears resurface, but every step, however small, is a victory. And in the end, you'll find that you're stronger than you imagined, especially when you thought you were too broken to fix. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories. Leave in the comments what story you'd like to hear next. And always remember, you deserve relationships that uplift you, not trap you. Setting boundaries isn't selfishness, it's survival. And you, what do you value more, toxic loyalty or healthy freedom?